Michael sat in the courtroom, a fortress of calm amidst the frigid tension that hung in the air like breath on a cold morning. Across the aisle, she sat, his wife, his betrayer, the woman who had once been the center of his world. Her blood-red heels tapped lightly against the polished floor, each click a taunt, each movement a declaration that she believed herself untouchable. She wore her smile like a crown, wide and defiant, her eyes glinting as if this were her coronation, not her trial. Everyone else in the room seemed to share in the performance, some leaning toward one another with hushed whispers, others smirking faintly, as though they already knew the verdict would be hers to claim. But Michael saw deeper. He had been waiting for this moment far longer than any of them could imagine. And he knew, soon, her smile would freeze. Her nails scratched lightly against the mahogany table, sharp and deliberate, marking her presence, marking her arrogance. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering in quick bursts, occasionally letting out a sly laugh that drew curious glances from the crowd. She didn't look at Michael, not once. As though 8 years of shared life, shared dreams, shared nights meant nothing but an inconvenient memory to erase. Her confidence radiated outward like perfume, intoxicating but sickly sweet. Michael, however, remained still. His face betrayed nothing, though inside, his thoughts circled with the precision of a hawk. He remembered what the others could not see, the cracks that had begun long before this trial, the betrayal that had cut him deeper than any courtroom declaration. 8 years earlier, he had met her in a gallery of glass and whispers, a place where laughter echoed against canvases worth more than most houses. She had been barefoot, her expensive summer dress brushing against her knees, a glass of red wine balanced casually in her hand. She had laughed so boldly that heads turned, but she hadn't cared. Her confidence was electric, dangerous. He had been drawn to her as though pulled by some invisible force, her laughter filling a void he hadn't known existed. That night, he believed he had found the woman who would stand by him through every storm. And for a while, she did. Their days together had been full of promise, of warmth, of plans spoken at midnight under tangled sheets. But laughter has a way of changing tones, of curdling into something sharp and mocking. The first fracture came with the late-night vibration of her phone. Michael, half asleep, had asked gently, "Who's messaging you at this hour?" She hadn't even looked up from the glowing screen before saying, "Just a coworker." He had wanted to believe her. For a time, he did. But the messages continued, trickling into their lives like cracks spreading across glass. Then came the sudden trips to Dubai, the long vacations with friends, her absences explained with the easy casualness of someone who assumed he wouldn't question. One night, while pouring a glass of water in the kitchen, he had heard her voice in the dark. "Not tomorrow, not yet." The words fell heavy, venomous, slicing through the stillness. She hadn't noticed him there, watching her silhouette, listening to promises whispered to someone else. Something inside him had splintered then, not with rage, not with desperate sorrow, but with a clarity colder than steel. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't begged. He had only thought, "This is only the beginning." From that moment, Michael became both husband and ghost. He learned to watch without being seen, to listen without interrupting, to gather every piece of her betrayal and turn it into ammunition. In silence, he began to dismantle their shared empire. He transferred company shares into a foundation she could never touch. He moved assets across corporate shelves, scattered them into unreachable vaults. He emptied accounts with precision, tightening the flow of money until only he held the strings. When he revealed his strategy to his lawyer and financial advisor, they stared at him with a mix of awe and unease. "Michael, this is extreme," one of them murmured. He had simply nodded. Extreme betrayal required extreme precision. But financial warfare wasn't enough. To destroy arrogance, one must expose it. And so, Michael hired a private investigator. The man was discreet, relentless. Within 3 weeks, he delivered a file thicker than a novel, filled with damning evidence. There were photographs, grainy, raw, of hotel rooms and hand-holding in dim restaurants. There were videos, her laughter spilling into another man's ear. There were receipts, dates, details, timelines. But the greatest revelation came at the end. The man she had entangled herself with was no ordinary lover. He was a professional con artist, with warrants chasing him across continents. He was not her savior. He was her ruin. Michael had stared at the file in silence, the weight of it pressing into his hands. He hadn't confronted her. He hadn't used it as a weapon then. He only placed it carefully aside, like a blade waiting for the right battle. The morning of the trial arrived heavy with gray skies. Snow drifted outside, silent and indifferent, as Michael walked into the courtroom. She entered moments later, dressed in white, immaculate as though she were walking toward a wedding altar. The young man, her partner in deceit, trailed at her side, his posture stiff, defiant, yet his eyes never meeting Michael's. She smiled as though this was her stage, as though justice itself would bend for her. But Michael knew better. He had written this ending long before she stepped into her costume of purity. When the judge began to read, the room shifted. The documents revealed the transfers, the foundations, the vanished accounts. Each word carved deeper into her illusion. In light of the presented evidence, the judge intoned, the assets of the defendant are no longer in her control. Her face faltered, the smile trembling, then freezing. Her lawyer stuttered, frantic, liquid funds. 2,000 left. His voice a frantic whisper not meant for others, but carried nonetheless. Murmurs filled the room, spreading like wildfire. The arrogance that had once filled her eyes began to falter. Then the doors opened. 2 police officers entered, their presence commanding silence. The air grew heavier. She tried to compose herself, her chin tilting higher, but the officers walked directly toward her. Ma'am, one said firmly, you need to come with us. Finally, she looked at Michael. For the first time in years, their eyes locked. She was trembling. Her voice cracked as she asked, what does this mean? The officer dropped the final hammer. You are under arrest for fraud and money laundering. Her world, so carefully painted in lies and arrogance, shattered in an instant. The young man who had stood beside her disappeared like a coward into the crowd, abandoning her without hesitation. And for the first time in 8 years, Michael saw her truly alone. Michael stood and walked out of the courtroom. Snow was falling harder now, swirling in the wind, coating the city in silence. Behind him came the sounds of footsteps, shouts, sirens, but he did not turn. A figure approached, slipping an envelope into his pocket. Michael turned to find the detective, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. Ready for the second act? The man asked quietly. Michael looked at him, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Without opening it, he rolled the envelope between his fingers, then tore it clean in half. The fragments scattered into the snow. No, Michael said softly. It's already over. He stood still for a moment, watching as she was led outside in handcuffs. Her face was pale, her steps small, her body shaking as if the cold had finally reached her bones. She looked at him, her eyes wide with fear, confusion, disbelief. For years she had been untouchable, untamed, always the one in control. Now, she was nothing but another prisoner, swallowed by the system, abandoned by her lover, stripped of everything. Their eyes met one last time. Michael shaped the words silently with his lips, you're free. Her confusion deepened, as though the words themselves were a cruelty she could not understand. And then she was gone, swallowed by the patrol car, by the sirens, by the snow. Michael turned and walked into the silence ahead, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets. He did not tremble. He did not falter. The noise of collapse faded behind him, replaced only by the soft hush of falling snow. He thought of the years he had given her, the laughter he had once loved, the nights he had once believed were forever. He thought of the betrayal, the secrets, the lies whispered in darkness. And yet, as he walked away, he felt no hatred. Because hatred binds the soul. Indifference frees it. The greatest victory was not her ruin, it was his release. She was free, yes. But free alone, ruined, nameless. And Michael? Michael was more than free. He was reborn. Some battles, he thought, are not won with a sword. They are won with silence, with patience, with ink on paper and signatures in shadows. They are won with a pen. And Michael had held the pen. With it, he had written the final period on a story that had long been bleeding toward its end. If Michael's story gripped you, if betrayal, revenge, and cold justice left you breathless, then stay with us. More stories of secrets, downfall, and triumph await. Like, share, and subscribe, because the sharpest victories are often written in silence, and you don't want to miss the next one.